Hi, and welcome to another session of HTML. In this particular session, we will try and make this particular part of this web page. Okay, in this, we will be using majorly heading and we will be using paragraph. And when we use paragraph, we will also see that there are different ways to manipulate the text, their style, and how we can do that in HTML. What is it that we got in HTML? Okay, so let's start from here. So if you see, this backtracking is the heading of this complete page. By heading, it means that, generally what happens is that you want to have a heading which just kind of gives a reference that what is there in the complete page. So how do we add headings and what are different kind of headings? Let's first see that and then we will go ahead and write the code. So here you can see we have 6 levels of heading. So our heading start from H1, then goes to H2, H3, H4, H5 and H6. And just like it is there on this particular page, you can see that the size of the headings, or for that matter size of the text, keeps on changing from H1 to H6. So basically H1 is something that is, as we saw, that if you want to have just one word or one sentence which summarizes your page, that will be H1. So basically H1 is something, whichever text you want that the user comes to your website and just and grabs the attention. So if you want any text to grab the attention, that one text or that one statement, it is going to be going in H1. So out of all the headings that we have, whichever heading you want to give the most importance, you will give it using H1. And let me tell you, you can use only one H1 in your page. Obviously what is happening is that, let's say you have a book, so the book has got a title. So H1 is pretty much like that. If you consider one web page as a book, you can't have multiple titles for a particular book, right? Similarly, what happens is that accordingly, each of the headings, each of the level of headings have their own importance. For that matter, let's say what happens is that books have chapters. So now let's say, just like every chapter has its own heading, we will have web page in which, let's say, we have different section and every section has its own heading. Maybe we have about you, maybe we have careers. So let's say one page has different sections. So each of these sections will be, let's say, H2. Okay, the heading of each of these sections can be H2. Similarly, let's say inside a particular section there is another text which you want to highlight, that will go under H3. So what will happen is that, apart from just changing the size of the font, it is also defining that how much important a particular text is in the page. Okay, another thing about H1, H2, or for that matter headings, is that this is also used by Google search engine to understand that what are the relevant text or what is the relevant content that is there in the web page. So make sure you choose H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6 accordingly and very carefully. There are few rules and regulations you should try and understand about H1 to H6, for that matter, or headings. So first of all, as I told you, is that there should be just one H1 in your page. There could be multiple H2. And the other thing, if you see, is that H6 is really small here. Okay, so let's say if you want to achieve a behavior like H6, let's say you have a paragraph, but let's say you want that the font should look like H6 or something like that, the size should be there. That does not mean that you use H6 just because you want a similar look like a H6, okay, or a heading to of a level H6. You should never use H1 or to H6 or any sort of heading just for the sake of styling. You should use the paragraphs and you can use the CSS to do the styling. You should use the headings only if it has got the relevance importance over here. So let's just go ahead first of all and write different text, or this text only, in from H1 to H6 and see how they look in the browser, and then we will go ahead and write the headings. Okay, before that I would like to tell you guys one more point, is that when you are having headings in your web page, make sure not to skip a level. Try not to skip a level, which means that it should not be the case that you have H1 and directly you have H3 and you're skipping H2. So try and have the levels one by one. This is a good practice. Yes, if you want to change the font size or something, you can do that using CSS, as we go ahead and see CSS. So first let's just go ahead, write H1 to H6 and see how they look on the web page. Now let's go ahead and see all the headings we have. So let's start with H1. Okay, and we will copy this and we will just change it to H2, H3, and we will run this and see how it works. Okay. And one more thing is, okay, one more thing I'll show you guys. So we have one H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. Okay. So let's quickly change this. We have this as H3, this as H4. Okay, let's save this and run. So if you see, you can see 6 different type of headings. So now what happens in case of HTML is that by default they add some styling on their own. So if you see, they have added a particular font, they have added a particular font size and font type basically. So these things will happen, and obviously we can change this using CSS. Now in this case, what we are going to do, we are going to use H1 for our backtracking. Another thing that is there is that, let's say, what if I write H7 or H8? So let's write that and see what happens. So let's say we make it H7, H7, okay. So now what happens is that as soon as you make it H7, it looks like a normal paragraph. It won't work anymore because the latest, the maximum level we can go till is H6. After that, it won't have any effect of heading. So better not to have it. Okay. So in this case, we will, for our backtracking, we will use H1. Let's write backtracking here. Okay. And we will also change the title. If you can see, the title is backtracking here, and we have document. So we will change it to backtracking. Okay. Now, so we have our backtracking at both the places. So now what happens is that apart from this, rest of these are paragraph tags. Rest of these are written using paragraph tags. So what happens is that, again, paragraph tags, everything written under a paragraph tag will have some sort of spacing, on the top of it, on the bottom of it, and obviously they'll have some sort of font size. So for now, to achieve this, we will just use the paragraph tag. So let's say I copy this one, okay, and I put it inside the paragraph tag. So basically paragraph tag is p tag, and you can say that it is also, let's write it down and we'll understand. So since p is the element over here, so this is the p element also, you can see that, or this is the paragraph tag or p tag. Okay, inside this, let's say I simply copy paste this, sorry. So you got this particular line. Okay, so now what happens in this particular case, if you see, is, if I refresh this, is that there is a particular distance that is out there. So we can change these distances using CSS. We will see this later on. Now what happens is that here, if you see, this is a particular symbol over here, which is a copyright symbol. And what I did, since I copy pasted it, it looks like it has got copy pasted. But let's say, what if you don't know how to go ahead and achieve this particular symbol? Let's say you just got the design and you have to put copyright symbol. So obviously these kind of symbols have got some special codes. You can use those HTML codes. Let's say if you know, you go ahead and you write that. If you don't know, what you have to do, Google. So why I'm telling you to Google and why not I'm telling you the code directly, because let's say for this I'm going to tell you, but as you go ahead you will find one or the other code for which a symbol for which you don't know the code. So what will you do in that particular case? You will have to Google, and Google is going to be your friend. So make sure you learn how to use Google in case of your query, how to look for your query, how to look for your answers. Even that is a very important part. So let's say for now I write copyright symbol HTML. So you also got the suggestion. So here, if you see, this copyright is having this particular number. So let's just go ahead, rather than this, I'll copy paste this. Okay, let's see if it works. So if you see, it is working perfectly fine. Okay, now rest of these are also paragraphs. So I'll quickly go ahead and add two of the paragraphs. I won't add the complete one. Okay, let's run this. And you see, you have got till here, you got the exact same. So you can just go ahead and copy paste this one as well. You will get the exact same results. So make sure you try this code and you copy paste this example as well. Okay, now what happens over here is that we have certain texts over here and all of them look exactly same. So there could be certain situations in which I want to highlight a particular text, or let's say I have to put a date like 12th of November, or for that matter I want to make a particular text bold, or give it more emphasis or italic. So these are small kind of things that we can do in case of with our text using HTML. So first let's see about making our text italic. So there are two tags over there which do the purpose. Number one is em. I'll show you the tags that we're going to talk about. Okay, so these are the tags we will be talking about, and some of them work exactly in the same manner in terms of their looks, but they have a fundamental difference. So we will start with em and I, then we can go to strong bold, then we will go to each of them one by one. Okay, so let's start with em. So now let's say what I do is that I want to give this particular text some sort of special attention due to one or the other reason. Okay, or let's say here we want to say that backtracking is a form of recursion. So I want to emphasize a bit on recursion. So what I'll do is that I will add em. Em stands for emphasis, and as a result of which this particular text will be rendered in italic way. Let's see that. So if you see, okay, I have not closed the tag over here. So this, if you see, if you don't close the tag over here, what will happen is that it will apply to all the text that is coming after that. So make sure you apply the closing tags properly. Now if you see what is happening, this is getting a bit slant, or we all know this is italic. Now what happens is that if I use italic, or for that matter I use I tag, okay, though I is not the right place for backtracking, we will use bold there, but for now to show you guys, let's say I use I over here as well. So if you see, even backtracking is now looking the same like recursion. So now what happens is that the difference between backtracking and italic, though they look exactly same, is that emphasis or em is used to emphasize a certain point, and it conveys a special meaning to the browser that this is something that is conveying emphasizing, or I want to emphasize on this particular statement. But italic is just the styling. It's just a coincidence that both of them look exactly same. So depending upon your purpose, if you just want something to look italic, go ahead and use italic. But if you want to put emphasis on a particular statement, like here I would like to do recursion in italic, because I want to put special attention on this, I'll use emphasis, okay, or em. The other thing we have is strong or bold. So let's say here I want to highlight backtracking. Okay, so if you see here, what is happening is that backtracking and recursion are looking exactly same, but I want to keep some sort of bifurcation. I want to highlight backtracking a bit more. So in that case, we have again two options, strong and bold. So one option is you use strong. So if you see what will happen, strong will give it a bit more weight. It will give it a bit more weight and it looks bold. Okay, and what will happen is that we have another tag B which does that same task. So B stands for bold. Okay, if I refresh this, again if you see, both of them exactly look the same. Again, the difference between them is that backtracking is the strong tag over here is conveying special meaning, that I want to strongly represent this particular point, but bold is just a styling. Okay, it is not conveying any special meaning. They don't have any, I'll say, effect on the Google search engine, or for that matter SEO. But yes, for your for making it much more clear, you should make the use as per the use case. If you really want to put a special emphasizing on something, or you want to do something like that, go ahead and do strong. And if you just want to do styling, go ahead, you can do bold. Okay, and these things are also controlled by CSS. Obviously we will see as we go ahead. So these two are the things that we saw. Other things that we have to see, let's see what is it. So let's say we can see sub and sub, and insert versus deletion. So sub stands for subscript, and sub stands for superscript. So the major difference between them is that, let me show you how it looks. So basically subscript is when you have a text, let's say X, and you want to put something in the bottom. Okay, so if you see, in when you are coding, you will see that, okay, we have arrays and a of I. You write many times like this, right? This a of I comes at the bottom. Whereas superscript, you can say that, let's say you are writing a date 16th. Okay, so in this case you will use superscript. Let's just go ahead and write this. After that we will see insertion versus deletion and mark and small. Great. So now first of all, let's do one thing. Let's use the a of I part. So let's say we have a paragraph. Okay. Okay, inside this we have a, and I'll have the sub tag sub. Okay, and I'll close this, and inside this I'll write I. Okay, and I'll copy this and paste this. Okay, so now let's say I have to add the date. So let's say 8/16, I write sub, and here I write th. Okay, here let's say I put space, and let's say I write December 2020. Okay, and here also I can, let's say, simply write is equal to 40. Okay, let's say it's a mathematical expression or something. Now let's refresh and see how it looks. So if you see here, in case of subscript, this I is coming at the bottom, and in case of superscript, it is coming on the top. So if you have to add any mathematical statement, you can use this in this way, or if you have to add any date, you can use simply the superscript. The other thing we had was insertion and deletion. So insertion looks like we have inserted something, and deletion looks like we are deleting. So in that case, we will have strike through. So let's say if I add over here INS, for insertion I'll use INS, and okay, and for deletion, let's say we do it with faced. Okay, let's say we have del. Okay, now let's refresh and see how it looks like. So if you see what happens in case of insertion, you have the underline which shows that, okay, this is something that is being inserted, and in case of deletion, it is a strike through. So the same behavior you can achieve using the strike through as well. So let's go ahead and add strike over here. So let's say I replace strike over here. So now if you see, what is happening is that though this is working, but this is coming as red. So this means that this is something that has been deprecated and is not supposed to be used anymore. So what happens when something is deprecated is that the support for that is given for some time, but the agenda is to stop using it eventually. So that is why they are showing this red thing over here. So again, in this case, deletion is giving a meaning, whereas strike is just the styling, just like we had in case of EM and I and strong and bold. So now these are some of the tags that you guys can use as you go ahead. Next, let's just see the mark. So mark is more like marking a particular area or highlighting a particular area. So let's say what I do is that I write a statement. Let's say I have this particular statement copyright, and I want to mark this particular statement. So in this case, what I'll do is that I'll use mark, okay, and I'll close this, okay. So if you see, it looks like a highlighted text. So what we do when we highlight something, we have a highlighter and we just color it with the highlighter that we have. In this case, we are doing the same thing with mark. Okay, another very interesting thing that we have is pre and code. This is actually you're going to use when you're writing a program or in your code, or basically you have to add any coding snippets. So let's first try and understand the difference between the two. So next we are going to talk about pre-tag and code tag. Both of them come very handy if you have to add any code snippet in your HTML page. So we will see the difference between the two. For that, first we will see the pre-tag. It's really interesting tag. So now let's say if you have a very small program, okay, let's say it's a C++ program. So now, okay, my bad. Okay, so now if you see, what will happen is that we will have some indentation over here. So for code readability, we should have some indentation over here. Let's say I write simply int a comma b. Okay, so now let's say what is happening here. There are several things. If I quickly go ahead and render this particular code just like that in HTML, we will get something like this. Everything is coming in one line. Another option that we have is that we add br here, 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 and then we add some spacing over here. Okay, now what will happen in case of pre is that the code, or whatever you have written inside the pre tag will get rendered as it is. So let's say if I add pre tag over here, and let's run this. So if you see, what has happened, that this has got rendered exactly, and for that matter, rather, the space that is out here, that has already also been incorporated. So now what is happening here is that this stdio.h is not getting rendered as we expected, because this particular is a special character and we need to handle it specifically, and we will see how to handle that in the upcoming session. Okay, so now let's remove this line for now so that it looks good. Okay, so if you see, the indentation is coming as it is. So let's say even if I have to draw some symbol, or let's say some really small image using the keyboard. So now if you see, let's say I do something like this. We have pre, okay. Now what will happen, let's say I do something like this. Okay. So let's say if you want to create any shape, this generally happens in code when you just want to do something with this kind of stuffs. So in this case, let's say I hit refresh. If you see, again, this is coming exactly same. So what happens in case of pre is that the text that we render, by default it is rendered in monospace font. Okay, we will talk a lot about font, but monospace is one of the font that decides that what should be the styling, and there are several factors that is getting affected by that. So now in this case, this is coming out to be monospace. So now this is pre, this is where you can use pre. And now another thing that we had was code. So we generally use code if we have just one line of code, or just there is a line and a particular code snippet. It could be 1 word, 2 word, maximum like 1 line, and you want it to highlight like it is a code. So now let's say what we do here, we write that let's say we have p tag, and we write back tracking uses push. Okay, so now let's say this push is more like a code snippet, it is a function. So what I'll do is that I'll put code here and code here. Okay, now if you will see, it will look different from rest of the statement. So if you see, this is looking pretty much like a code, and again here in this case this will be monospace by default. So this is the use case of pre and quote. Now there is another thing that we have to see, which is block quote. So what happens, block quote is that it basically refers to the quotations. So what happens is that when you write a quotation, how it will differ from a normal paragraph is that a kind of spacing will be added. So this is the only visual difference you guys can see, that there will be some spacing that will be added, which makes it looks like a quotation. So let's say I write block quote, okay, and I go ahead and write, let's copy some line from here only, okay. So again, you don't use block quote in these cases like I am using, you just use it when you actually have a quotation and you want to give it a special attention, okay. So now if you see what is happening with the block quote, there is extra spacing that is getting added on the left, on the right, okay. So this pretty much looks like a block quote. Now what happens is that in the block quote you can add one more attribute, which is cite. Okay, so now what happens in case of cite is that you will use cite, and it has to come here. So basically cite means that from where have you taken this quotation. So let's say I have taken this quotation from this particular website. So what I'll do is that I'll just simply put the URL of the website. Now in this case, will it affect anything visually? No. Visually there won't be any effect. The only thing is that let's say if any search engine is coming or any bot is coming, then they will get to know more about this particular quotation from this particular URL. So that is why we simply go ahead and use site URL. So we just give the site URL, okay. If I refresh, there won't be any change, okay. So now that is all about some of the, I'll say text modification we can do using HTML. And as we go ahead, we will talk more about it. We will see how to handle special characters just like we got in hash include std.h. So next we see this particular page, we have to add an image, and we also have to add a list. So let's just go ahead and see in the next session that how we can add an image and how we can add a list, and we will talk more on image and list, okay.